Okay. So, last class, we stopped right around here talking about ethos and credibility, right? So, sounds right? Sounds right to me, so we're going to roll with that. Now, the other thing that you have to account for when you look at talk about knowing your audience, gauging your audience. In general, you will have three types of audiences. The first example, the first type of audience is going to be a supportive audience. A supportive audience, and the definition of this really is that they agree with you kind of fundamentally. A supportive audience already agrees with you. So using logos, which is what?
Soundness of argument and logic.
Yes, logic. Soundness of argument, logic. If you use logos with a supportive audience, it's kind of like they already agree with you, so there's no real point in doing that. The most effective thing to do whenever you're talking to a supportive audience is to appeal to the pathos, which is what?
Emotional.
Yes, pathos, which is going to be the emotional appeal, dramatic language and gestures and all of that stuff, because they already agree with you in the first place. This really is this is obviously the easiest type of audience, is a supportive audience. You see the detrimental effects of this on many different levels. If you just look at artists in general, you can see what tends to happen. There's if you look at like comedians, for example, you can look at comedians like early bodies at work, and whenever they're out on the road and they're touring clubs, and then they have to be. I mean, your job as a comedian obviously is. I'm not one, but I would think that your job would be funny. If you're like going to like comedy clubs across the United States, you're meeting people across cultural boundaries, socioeconomic backgrounds, and just general temperaments and what they find funny or what they don't find funny. And most comedians early on in their careers, they start off very, very funny. They've done all this work to become funny, to be funny just to people in general. And then as they become famous, as they have their own style of comedy, what you see happen is they become very, very insulated, because people will then go to a comedy show just to see them no matter what, because they like them from like a movie. Like Martin Lawrence is a perfect example. There's Martin Lawrence. You guys even know who Martin Lawrence is? Like 4 people in here that are around my age that do. Yeah, Martin Lawrence was like hilarious in the '90s, and he had this amazing television show called Martin, where he dressed up like a woman named Shanae. And then he came out with like the Bad Boy movie with Will Smith, and then that kind of launched his movie career. And he was hilarious in movies. He was hilarious in Bad Boys, and was as the comedic relief with Will Smith, and he had a string of movies that came out that were very successful. They were very funny. But he got away from doing his stand-up, and then he started going back and trying to do stand-up, and the people that went to see him went to go see him because of his movies in the first place, and they were going to laugh anyway. So whenever he tried to do like comedy specials like on HBO, they didn't go over well, because he'd been on the road touring, but the people that went to go see him because they already liked him anyway, so he didn't really know what was funny or what wasn't funny, right? It's like whenever if you are in the professional world, if you become a boss or you become an administrator, you become a manager, and then you surround yourself, it's very easy to surround yourself with people, if you're in a position of authority, with people that will kiss your butt, right? And then that are yes men. They'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. If you're in a position of authority or management in a company, and everybody that works underneath you agrees with you, you got a problem, because you don't know which way is the best way to be steering the ship, because everyone's agreeing with you. Actually, by being disagreeable, people don't think that people think that being disagreeable is a bad thing to be, and it's not. Being disagreeable is one of the highest meters for people to actually trust you, value your opinion, and actually to have you succeed and make more money. But you see it in the artistic world, you see it in the professional world, and you just see this at a societal level, right? Many people now talk about individuals and groups of people that live in echo chambers. What's an echo chamber? You want to know? Let's put 2 and 2 together, or 1 and 1 together. What is an echo?
Your voice comes back.
Yeah, you say something and then you hear it again, right? And the chamber is a place, it's an insulated place. So if you live in an echo chamber, right, that means that you're in a room, you're in a place where you speak and then you just hear your words repeated over and over and over again, right? And so now many people, by and large, most people tend to live or design their lives to be like echo chambers, right? I mean, because of the rise of social media and the rise of internet and the ease of communication, one of the most popular things for people to do whenever they go out and they try to find new groups, try to find new friends or expand their social circle, is they don't expand their social circle across worldviews or cultural differences. They expand their social circle amongst people that they have the exact same worldview, exact same philosophy, exact same likes, exact same dislikes, right? And so whenever people, you see this on Facebook posts and stuff, right? Like when people post some like what they think is a highly intelligent like analysis of global socioeconomic level politics and global politics, and it's some like it's some 20-year-old kid that works at a gas station, like, well, the government's doing this, and you see like just a whole list of like, that's right, you tell them, Billy Bob, and right? Because there's all these people, right, that they found themselves online and they believe the exact same thing, and they just bolster up one another, and they get high on their own praise. That's by and large how much of our society is run. It's the exact same thing. Just turn on a news station, right? Turn on a news channel. They are echo chambers. They repeat the same thing over and over and over again amongst themselves, rile themselves up. Oftentimes, not having any logic or reasoning behind it whatsoever. It's just an appeal to an emotion. If you have a supportive audience, you can do that. If you don't have a supportive audience, you can't appeal to emotion. The next level, though, is a wavering audience. If you have a wavering audience, that is an audience that is on the edge, right? They're balanced. So, for a wavering audience, you would have to apply all three at varying levels, right? Because the audience, and if something is wavering, that means it's not balanced, right? Something is wavering, that's on the edge of being balanced, right? So if it's a more supportive audience, right, then you can throw in a little more pathos, right, to balance out with your ethos and your logos, right? If it's a more hostile audience, like, okay, I'll take back some of the emotion and I'll appeal more to logic and my credibility or the credibility of my sources, whatever. Wavering audience, trying to strike a balance because you want your argument to be balanced. But you balance your argument based on your audience. So, the last one, hostile audience. A hostile audience can either be apathetic, skeptical, or hostile, outright hostile. They all fall in the same category, really. Apathetic means that they just don't care, right, one way or the other. Skeptical means that they inherently distrust you, and then hostile means that they don't trust you and they don't like you. More importantly, they just don't like you. And whenever you have that, when you have either one of these, apathetic, skeptical, or hostile, when you have either one, you need to focus on logos heavily and also on ethos. You need to focus on logos and then, it's not in here, but you need to focus on logos and ethos, okay? Because if they're hostile and they don't like you, there's no convincing them, especially, in the short time frame that you're going to be engaged with someone, you can't convince them to like you. And if you're more concerned about them liking you than you are about your point of view or your argument being heard or entertained, then you've already lost, right? It's not about them liking you. It's about them understanding or agreeing or you persuading them to your side. And if they don't like you, there's no point in appealing to the pathos of someone. There's something that I read a while back that was like very, very true. It was like a tweet or something, but it was something along the lines of like the difference between a man. It was something that a girl wrote. The difference between a man being funny and being a creep is whether or not you're attracted to him. That's like the only difference. So like if you're attracted to a guy and he does something that is funny, but if you're not attracted to him and he does something, then he's a creep. You can do the exact same thing, right? It's just whether or not you're attracted to him or not. And so, this is like whenever you have a hostile audience, like you don't want to play. They either like you or they don't like you. If they don't like you, then you can't appeal to humor. You can't appeal to any type of emotion. So you need to look at logos and you need to look at ethos. So your logos, you'll be looking at the statistical data, right? Data analysis, facts, studies, all of that. to support your point of view. Because, one of the things I think we've talked about a time or two before here is that facts don't have feelings. Right? Facts don't have feelings. So you can bypass the need for them to like you using logos, also ethos, right? Establishing your credibility. You may not like me, but I know this. I know what I'm talking about because of X, Y, and Z. And then, if you look at it, just look at it in how it comes into play, just with me in this class, right? So you guys, you're not a hostile audience to me whatsoever. I really like you guys. I enjoy teaching you guys, and you guys do smile once in a blue moon when I speak, which is nice. It makes me feel good. But if anything, you're apathetic, right? Like, you're apathetic because, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, you don't want to be here with me, and I get it. I have my 8 o'clock classes are worse. I can't even get them to put on clothes. They just wear pajamas to my class, right? They are not about what I have to say. So me trying to get them to like me is an absolute lost cause. And in general, it is. It's difficult to like somebody. Difficult to like me for sure. I know. So you spend 3 or 4 months of your life with me, and then you move on, right? So me appealing to your emotions and stuff like that doesn't matter because you're in school. And the overriding thought that you have when you're in school is, one, I can't wait till this is over. But two, like, when the hell am I ever going to use this again? Right? So if you're thinking in the back of your mind, when am I ever going to use this again in my class, which you do, which you should. It's good to think those things, right? To be critical of these of the information that you're being given and to try to compartmentalize that, right? So my job, my battle with you, not battle, my job, my persuasive tactic with you is to appeal both to logos and to ethos, right? So why am I here? What is Mr. Lowe telling me? How does this matter? How does this tie into the rest of my life? How is this educating me? I don't see the point. Okay, well, I'll show you. Just last class, right? Using logos. Talking about ethos, pathos, and logos. I showed an example of just a guy getting a date using ethos, pathos, and logos. You want a date? Fine. You have the logic, you have the emotion, and then you have the credibility behind it. We see how that is transformed into a simple text message between a guy and a girl. The guy gets the girl to go out on a date with him. But the same thing happens whenever you're looking at a professional situation and you want to raise for a job. You go out, you present the ethos, logos, pathos of why you need to raise for a job, why you need a promotion, a title bump, whatever it is. Right? And you can apply that to any type of situation, right? Just communication between a husband and a wife, whatever, right? Argumentation, persuasion, it consists of these things. It has real-world examples, and it has real-world consequences of being able to do it correctly or incorrectly. If you look at ethos, right? Ethos is credibility. I'm the person that needs to be credible to be able to talk to you. I have assert credibility on 2 different levels with you, right? One, obviously, I have to have at least a master's degree to be in front of you speaking. I've got years of experience talking, teaching to students with education in this. Also, outside of here, right, I have a professional job in a private industry, in a financial institution, where I've told you before, I hire and fire people based on their ability to communicate ideas with me in logical, laid out, and simple messages, right? I work with people across the country in marketing and communication and in training. And I apply these principles to my daily life, my personal life, and to my professional life outside of here. One of the biggest problems that a teacher has is that, like, what the hell does this person know? He's only been in school his whole life. And then he starts teaching in school. He has never been out in the real world. I live in the real world. Most of my life is out in the real world. I choose to be here with you. That establishes credibility with you on a level that, many instructors are not able to establish, right? Because I haven't spent my whole life inside these walls just being in books. I actually put these to practice. Right? And it does well for me. So, ethos, logos, right? So, at the very least, whenever you're looking at this, and you guys aren't really apathetic, you aren't really skeptical, or you aren't hostile, right? But more than anything else, students tend to fall more into this category. If you think back and look back at your previous teachers and look back at instructors that you will have in the future, one of the issues a lot of instructors tend to have is that they try to appeal so much to pathos, right? Because they need you to identify with them. Like I know used to be an English instructor here years ago that would try to make their students read the books that they like to read, right? And whenever you've got, you're teaching 150, 200 students over the course of the semester, there's going to be a good chance the teacher was a much older teacher, right? Like, I don't like to read books that a 70-year-old likes to read in general. Like, I don't want to read those books. Does a 20-year-old want to read those books? Hell no, a 20-year-old does not want to read the same type of books that a 70-year-old teacher is going to want to make students read. right? So the instructor would then become enraged, like, how come you don't like these books? Oh, they're so great, and they're so full of art, blah, 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 right? Trying to push on these emotional attachments to something that when an audience is not emotionally invested, nor should they be, because I am 3 months out of the rest of your life, right? So to make an impact, to appeal to your emotions is like, gone. You're young, like your emotions change all the time. Like facts, credibility, those don't change, right? So you'll see this with a lot of instructors that fail to read their audience. They try to appeal to things that doesn't work because they don't read the audience. They don't read their audience well enough, right? So to establish to a hostile audience, you need to establish credibility and an authority, which is your ethos. Okay, so to put all of this into play whenever you're actually writing an essay, the first thing you want to do is at the beginning of the paper, you want to identify the controversy surrounding the issue and state your position on the thesis. So you'll see this. This is a reappearing theme in a narrative. The first thing you need to do is say what the point of the story is. What's the point of the story? The second essay we did, description/definition. What are you describing? What are you defining? What is the point of this essay? Same thing here. What is the point of the essay? Right? There are different variations on what you're going to be, how they talk about describing the point of the story, but it's all the same thing. What's the point? Here it says what the controversy is and then what's your position. But that's still what's your point. What's the point of the story? What's the point of the essay? What's the point of your idea? Have to have that first every time. And it needs to be beyond the fact that Mr. Lowe assigned it to me. Right? Really, what's beyond that? The thesis of an argumentation persuasion paper is often called an assertion or a proposition, but again, it's still a thesis. It's called an assertion or proposition, but it still operates in the same manner as a thesis statement. Argumentation persuasion assumes conflicting viewpoints. Be sure your proposition focuses on a controversial issue and indicates your view. Avoid a proposition that is merely factual. What is demonstrably true allows little room for debate. So, here, in the past decade, the nation's small farmers have suffered financial hardships. Okay, fair enough, that's a fact, right? What are you going to say about that? That's not a controversial point of view. You're not taking a stance, you're just stating a fact. It's hard to write an essay around a fact. Use a fact to support a point, but you don't use a fact as a point. So, if you're going to have a thesis statement out of this fact, you would say, inefficient management rather than competition from agricultural conglomerates is responsible for the financial plight of the nation's small farms, right? It's a completely different thing. Now you have a thesis, you have your fact, your problem in there, that controversial issue, but you also have your point on it and your stance on it. First statement is true. The second statement, though, takes a stance on a complex issue. Okay, go to the next page. All right, so you want to look at the size of your thesis and the size of the statement, or your thesis statement and the size of your essay, rather. This, again, ties back into all the previous essays that we've written and will continue to write. So in your narrative, right, and this is like 90% of my students do this. I tell them not to do it, but they kind of do it anyway because they're just kind of wired to do it for some reason. The vast majority of my students, even the age groups, the vast majority of my students are like 18 to like 21, 22. So the vast majority of students, whenever they write a narrative essay, most of them tend to write something that happened in their college. I mean, their freshman year or their senior year of high school or something. And what they end up doing is they'll just, your essay was like 3 pages long. So they'll tell me what happened over their senior year in 3 pages. And can you give me a good story in 3 pages over your senior year? No, you can't. That's a summary, right? I don't know what happened over your senior year in 3 pages, right? That's a Cliff's Notes. That's not a story, right? There's no details in there whatsoever. One of the common themes throughout my stories that I get from students is like a coach that bullied them, a teacher that bullied them, or a fellow student that bullied them. And so they'll go for 3 pages. They'll just say that this person bullied them, and it bullied them, and bullied them. But I'm like, by the end of the summer, I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't seem like bullying, because they didn't give me a single example. They just told me that they were bullied, right? As opposed to like, I don't know, a bully. Do they still get swirlies in high school? Can they stick it in the toilet and they flush their head down the toilet? Does that still happen? No? Is that too old school for that? All right, well, whatever. A particular incident of bullying, right? You can write about that in 3 pages, right? If some big bully comes and picks you up and puts your head in the toilet and then flushes your head and then gives you a little swirly thing. What they call swirlies, right? You could go into great detail about that, what the bathroom looked like, what the toilet water felt like, what it did to your hair when it spun around, when it was getting zipped down the drain, right? You can go into great deal about that, and then the psychological damage it has done to you to this day, and on and on and on, right? That's a 3-page story, but not like Greg was mean to me every day, and it made me sad. Like, that's not a story. That's just a general summary, right? Students of mine that are older, they talk about their past, right? They'll tell me, a lot of the times when I have students that are older, it's even more difficult because they'll tell me about their 20s, right? Like my 20s were wild. That's 10 years, right? You can't tell me a story about 10 years in 300 pages. You could probably tell me about your 20s, but not in 3 pages, right? So take one incident out of your 20s that changed your life, or that made you be different than the way that you are now, that guided your life, or whatever. One time, one incident, 1 hour of your life that changed. You can write about that in 3 pages, right? It's about knowing the size of the assignment versus the thesis statement. Whenever you look at the description definition essay, right? The description and the definition essay. You were looking at, let's say, for example, I don't know, like love, right? I think I threw that word around, which is, that's a pretty loaded word, right? I mean, I've got a lot of loves in my life. I love pizza and ice cream. I love beer. I really love beer. I could write for like 500 pages about beer. There's lagers, there's IPAs, there's stouts, and each one of them of their own deserves hundreds and hundreds of pages themselves. Benjamin Franklin said that beer is proof, and beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. And I truly believe that. Beer is a wonderful thing. Good beer is beautiful. So I love beer, obviously. But I love beer separately than I love my wife on a different level. And the way that I love my wife is very different from the way that I love my children. I've got 2 kids. I've got a young boy, I've got a 5-month-old boy, and I've got a 2-some-odd-month-old daughter. And the way that I love them is separately. And the way that I love them is separate than my wife. We have a pet pig. Yeah, her name is Ida. She's not cute anymore. She's huge. And she's a pain in the butt, but I love her. Anyway, so the way that I love my children is different than the way that I love Ida, which is less than I love beer, but I still love Ida nonetheless. So each of those, right? If I'm going to write an essay about love, I can't just write an essay about love. My best friends are friends that I've had. We went to daycare together. We played t-ball together, and I just married one of my best friends. I just married his sister. I was a minister at their wedding. Just like 2 months ago, I was a minister at their wedding. I had to do the online thing real fast because I'm not a real preacher, believe me. Actually, before the wedding, I was with the groomsmen at the bar, and the thing that you do is take shots and drink beer before a wedding, apparently. And so I had the Bible, and I was taking a shot with the groomsmen and having a beer, and the lady that was serving us, she leaned over, she goes, "What kind of preacher are you?" But anyway, I married one of my best friend's sisters, right? And we were talking the night before the wedding. He got married in Alaska, and I went to Alaska, and I played the music. I played the music in their wedding. They got married in front of this beautiful glacier at a public park in Alaska, and so I have all these memories tied in with this family, and I love them. There's a group of 5 or 6 guys that when things are really, really bad in our lives, or somebody loses a family member or whatever, we don't, it's I call them up, hey, just let you know, I love you, right? I love them, they're my brothers. And that's a particular type of love that is different, right? And I could write a book about that. Because we spend our lives together. So, each of these things are separate in and of themselves. So the size of your paper, the size of the project must correlate to the size of the thesis statement, the size of your point of view, the size of your argument, whatever it is, right? The two must go hand in hand, because whatever you're talking about deserves support, and it deserves detail, and it deserves to be expanded upon. So you must choose those carefully. So if you look at this one, the welfare system has been abused over the years. Fair enough. better thesis is welfare payments should be denied to unmarried teenage girls who have more than one child out of wedlock. Okay, this works on two different levels. One, this is very specific. Two, this is controversial, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty controversial. Teenage girls out of wedlock. One, you're making a moral stance because having a child outside of wedlock versus being married, that ties back into like morality and family issues and societal values as well, or imposing societal or government imposing values on a society and on an individual, as well as that like arguably who's going to need welfare more than a single mom that's still in her teens, right? Like if you're 40 years old or 35 years old and you have a kid outside of marriage, odds are you probably got a child or you've been around long enough to figure out how to survive. You're 17 years old, 16 years old, 15 years old, and you have a kid. A cousin of mine that got pregnant when she was 16 years old and she didn't know what the hell to do, right? Like, what do you know when you're 15 years old? You're too stupid to be having sex in the first place, but that's not going to stop people because you have no ramifications of that, right, in a real-world setting, which is exactly what we're talking about here, right? 15-year-old gets pregnant. Right? What the hell are they going to do? What do they know? Nothing. They were just physically able to have a child just a few years back, They don't know anything. So if you look at this, right, this is a controversial issue. It's a controversial point of view. It's a controversial stance on an issue, right? And because of that, it draws the reader in, right? Now, you don't want to be controversial simply for the sake of being controversial. You see this happen all the time. The media is very bad about this. Sports media is horrible about this. You guys know who Skip Bayless is? Good. Don't want to listen to him. He's like a 55-year-old man who gets paid millions of dollars to talk about other athletes, and he just got busted. Like, you see this? Like 6 months ago, he got busted. But he has like several Twitter accounts of his own under different names. And so he just forgot to log out of one of his own Twitter accounts. So he went back into his main Twitter account under a fake name and was like praising himself. But he got busted because it was like himself praising himself, and he forgot to switch over. He's like, you guys don't leave, y'all need to leave Skip alone. He's the best there is. He's the best guy in the business. He deserves all that money. And it was like he posted that about himself. So you see this happens in the sports media a lot because sports is entertaining, but sports is not entertaining 24/7, 365 days a year. So these people that have a job talking about sports 24/7, 365 days a year, they have to make these crazy, controversial statements that ultimately hold no water. It's just trying to get more headlines. So if your point of view is controversial for the sake of being controversial, that doesn't work. If you really believe your controversial point of view, that does work, right? That ties back into when I was talking about writing a narrative and just having a title, right? A title of your essay that grabs the reader's attention, but also ties into what you're saying, right? I remember I told you guys about that psychology professor that I had, like the first day of class, she just said sex. And then the whole class was looking at her like, continue, please. And she didn't, right? She started talking about the syllabus and then grading rubrics and all that. I'm like, what's this? This is not sexy, and then it does not involve sex, I don't think. So, you lost me there. So don't be controversial for the sake of being controversial. But if it ties into your point of view or ties into your argument, that's good. Okay, so if you look at point number 2 here, you want to provide readers with strong support for the thesis. And you do that on a couple different levels. You can use something like personal observation or experience, statistics from a report, facts from a newspaper article or journal, examples from interviews, expert opinions cited from documentaries. Now, again, remember you want to balance this out and you want to use these in accordance to your audience, right? So, if you look at the first one, which is a personal observation or experience. Now, this can work. It works very effectively. But you want to be balanced in how you do it. Just recently, last week, there was a podcast that came out, and the guy that runs the podcast is a guy named Jocko Willink. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he's written several books. I highly recommend reading them, actually. They're very good. But he was interviewing a guy named Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's a psychology professor out of Canada, who I follow very, very well. Brilliant man. And they were talking about the possibility of wickedness in men's souls and breaking the loop and righting yourself and your life and how basically if an individual is doing what they should be doing, then society basically kind of self-corrects, and it never works whenever you have a organization or an agency try to correct the individual. It's the individual's responsibility to correct the agency. So anyway, and he opens it up and it starts talking about they talk around this idea of like the shadow self and the evil that lurks, the possibility of evil that lurks in each individual's heart or soul. And so Jocko read a passage from a book that a girl and I think she was from Afghanistan wrote, and she was talking about how she was captured by one of the insurgents or taken by one of the insurgents and beaten and raped systematically over and over and over again. Can't sleep at night. Is afraid of the dark. Has nightmares, night terrors, on and on and on. And it was when I started listening to it, I was like, geez, this is a way to like. It was a 3-hour-long podcast. Like, I don't know if I can make it through 3 hours of this. This is rough. And so they go from that to then discussing these. There's the whole podcast is actually pretty dark. But they look at genocidal movements, kind of across cultural boundaries and throughout the time span of civilization, right? Because you're drawn in with this one story, right? But if he would, there's thousands of stories like this that originate in the Middle East, right? But if he would have read this interview, and then he would have read another girl's interview, and then another girl's interview, and they're all centered around like Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and all in the Middle East, like if that's your argument, that's horrible. Not denying that, but you're just telling me just a few hundred girls that live within a 1,000-mile radius of one another. Right? I live in Beaumont. That's not happening here. Right? Not in those quantities. Not to that extreme, and to not with the percentage of which is happening per capita that it is in the Middle East. So that makes it easy for me to say, well, that's them over there. Right? That's their backwards society, not ours. I live in Beaumont. Things are cool over here. Right? Doesn't happen. Because you're limiting your argument here. It's effective, but it's limiting for someone that's like, okay, because the overarching idea is like that each person has the ability to do evil things, wicked things, right? And then by not acknowledging that you don't have that ability, then that leads you to be manipulated by that darkness later on. So, for example, and this is one of the things that as they spread out their argument and they make their argument a more well-rounded argument. One of the things that I actually employ this whenever we talk about World War II in my 1302 class, and they do. I got this from Dr. Jordan Peterson, actually. What he does in his class is he will ask his students. He has like an auditorium full of students. He'll ask his students, like, imagine that you were a German citizen in pre-World War II, pre-Nazi Germany, and Hitler and the Nazi regime is on the rise. Do you think? Raise your hands. How many people in here think that they would have been a Nazi and actively participated in the Nazi Party at any level during World War II? And nobody raises their hand. Like most people, well, of course I would never be a Nazi, right? And then the response to that is, well, then statistically speaking, you're a liar because they're people, right? And they're like 70 to 80% of you would absolutely be Nazis in here. And then of course, like, well, how the hell? No, because I'm not a Nazi because of that, right? And get just on your moral high ground. And the overarching point of that is that the Nazis themselves, they didn't think that they were evil, right? They didn't think that they were bad. Nobody really thinks that they're evil. Nobody thinks that they're a bad guy, right? You justify your evil actions, your bad actions, by not acknowledging the fact that you have the ability to be evil. And then you see how that manifests itself, and that's a perfect example of like ISIL and ISIS right now. I mean, do you think that the terrorists in the Middle East, do you think that they think that they're being evil? Real question. Do you think that they're being evil? No, they think that they're warriors for God, right? And so what they've allowed themselves to do is they've allowed that evil that rests and like we have this, and look at like you look at the stuff that happened. I've talked about the stuff that happened in Charlottesville. It's the exact same thing, right? With this rise of the Aryan nation out of nowhere, right? Which is hate, right? It's a mixture of ignorance and hate that manifests itself in like and justified righteous actions. Like, no, this is our country. Look at what these people are doing to our country. Look at the crime rates of this group of people, and look at the welfare rates of this group of people. We are going to fight to get our power back. And you have this evil like manifest itself as a righteous action. You convince yourself that you're doing something great, but it's that darkness that's manipulating you, right? Because you're not acknowledging that like, well, I don't have that hate in me. I don't have evil in me. I have good in me. I'm going to be a warrior. And you see it happen in this country, in the right and the left. You see it happen. It's the exact same thing that happens to the people in the Middle East. They got caught up with radicalized Islam. It's the same thing that Christians do whenever they bomb abortion clinics. It's the exact same thing that the Germans did in World War II. Right? So they use these examples all throughout history, across cultures, across religions, and then they pepper it with individual stories. Right? And so that makes it, well, we're like, oh, okay, that's something to consider. Right? Rather than just story after story after story, like personal interview after personal interview after personal interview, because that becomes biased, and that only appeals more to emotion, right? And you take a step back, you look at the logic, you look at the historical fact, like, okay, maybe there's something to be said here. And then you look at the people that are, and then in the case of that podcast, look at the two people who were having that conversation. One was as a widely celebrated scholar of psychiatry and psychology that understands, spent his life as a doctor, and how the mind works, how groups of people function. And the other is a boots-on-the-ground, decorated Navy SEAL who has seen and battled evil as close as anybody else has ever seen it. Those are two people that I would think know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to evil, right? Sure. All three levels have been achieved, and at the end of that three-hour podcast about evil, which is a real bummer. Last thing, let's spend a little bit of time on this. As you seek outside evidence, you may perhaps, to your dismay, come across information that undercuts your argument. Resist the temptation to ignore such material. Instead, use the evidence to arrive at a more balanced, perhaps somewhat qualified viewpoint. Conversely, don't blindly accept points made by sources agreeing with you. Retain a healthy skepticism, analyzing the material as vigorously as if it were advanced by the opposing side. Okay, so this is common sense, but it bears repeating because, as you want to always keep an open mind, and as you further your own argument, as you look at the data, as you look at your facts, as you look at the people that are giving you those facts. I remember there was a thing that came out after September 11th, and it was like the 9/11, like the truth movement, 9/11 truth, right? So there are varying degrees of what people believe happened, surrounding the World Trade Center bombing, terrorist attacks. But and there's a lot of misinformation surrounding September 11th, and there's a lot of stuff that people just don't know. There's a lot of holes in evidence. But this whole 9/11 truth movement came out, and a lot of the stuff there is very attractive to morph into a hardcore conspiracy. Basically, to the most extreme side is that George Bush actually allowed September 11th to happen so that we could go to war with Iraq. And even beyond that is that he actually prompted it to happen. And then there were a few celebrities that got so far into the fact that the government actively wanted September 11th to happen. Not that it was because it was 100% an ignorance thing. There's a lot of gray areas surrounding it, but the fact that that the president constructed a plan to attack America, and so but they put forth all this evidence for that, and then there were some celebrities. There were a few radical talk show hosts and radio hosts that were pushing this stuff forward. A guy named Alex Jones, who's really popular now because he's done a lot of crazy stuff. Lately was one of the big proponents of that, and he was having
frogs gay.
Huh?
Making the frogs gay.
Yeah, water's made. He thinks that they're putting some fluoride and stuff in the water that makes frogs gay. But there is a little bit of evidence that some of that actually does work, but not the way that he makes it work out. But that's what conspiracy theorists do. They make their money off of being conspiracy theorists. So anyways, he started putting this whole 9/11 truth movement together. He was going to get all these celebrities behind him. So the celebrities that he lined up with him were Charlie Sheen, right in the wake of his, hookers and cocaine, Tiger Blood, rock star from Mars days, and then Spencer and Heidi from an MTV reality show, one of the old school MTV reality shows, and they They spent the rest of the week. Like nobody knows who they are anymore at all. This was like an obvious attempt to like try to get back some fame. And so I was talking to some people about it, and this is years ago when it kind of came up. I was like, hold on. I was like, look at these celebrities that he's convinced this is true. It's Charlie Sheen and then Spencer and Heidi from Summer Guy. Like those aren't real celebrities, and they're insane. They're obviously insane people. Like if you start looking at the information, you start looking at the other people that surround the information, and they're like, I mean, you need to back off your opinion on that whatsoever. Most people don't, right? But that's something that you're supposed to do. And conversely, you need to look beyond just what you want to look at. Remember at the very beginning of the class, we were talking about enlightenment, and this leads back to enlightenment, right? When you're confronted with something that opposes your point of view or opposes the way that you want to see the world, you have two choices. You can either lean into that and discover the reality of the reality of the world or your environment, or you can lean away from it, go back into the shadows, and just surround yourself with ignorance and darkness. Well, the other way is, I told you can see the world exactly how you want to. Just Google any thought that you have, right? Like as a pro statement, right? The world is this. These people are this. You'll find plenty. God exists, or bananas prove that God exists, or bananas prove that evolution isn't real, or there's all kinds of stuff you can Google on there, and you'll find all the evidence in the world that you'll ever need, right? Because you're going in wanting to be reaffirmed. I think we talked about it. Somebody mentioned in this class. There's a group of people called the Flat Earth Society. You guys know who they are? Okay, what do they believe? Just guess. They believe the Earth is flat by the thousands. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Americans that believe that the Earth is flat. That is a resurgence in the past 5 years. It has spread like wildfire. Belief that the Earth is flat. Despite you can do a third grade science experiment to prove that the Earth is round. Or you can take a friggin' plane ride and get a window seat and see that the Earth is round. But all evidence to the contrary is, of course, not. And whenever people are confronted about the flat earthers are confronted about it, they'll refer back to documentaries that they've seen on YouTube. The documentaries are so bad, Netflix won't even publish them. Hulu won't have them. You see like Hulu movies, they suck. Like all Hulu movies are horrible movies. Hulu won't have them. The only place they'll entertain them is YouTube, right? But that's fine. I want to believe that the Earth is flat, so I'm going to find evidence on, despite the fact that these are very, very bad documentaries with zero scientific evidence, and if the evidence that is supported, that is shown there, can be disproven in a second. If you talk to scientists, or just Google that too, right? Google their scientific evidence, and you'll see the fact that it's wrong, right? Doesn't matter. Earth is flat because I want it to be flat, because at the far end of this conspiracy theory that tens of thousands of people believe. They also believe that there's like these layers underneath the Earth where like old civilizations live in caves. Are you not a flat earther because you're shaking your head like?
No, they also believe that like gravity is from the Earth just rising. The flat plane of the Earth is always rising up, and that's how gravity is created.
Crazy. Don't spend. Google it. Look for a little bit of it, but don't spend. I spent like too many hours of my life just fascinated. It's like whenever you watch a train wreck, you know that a train wreck is about to occur, and you can't look away. I got sucked into this black hole of flat earthers. These people surround me like. They check me out at Market Basket when I go get my groceries, and they handle my money at the bank. These people are everywhere. It's horrifying. So, retain healthy skepticism. That's the point of all this. All right. On Friday, we will finish this up